My sister doesn't like my wife's service dog, which she needs for loud and crowded events, and she's going so far as to try to get my wife to leave them at home because they won't be needed at her son's wedding. My wife and I live in a different state to my family, however we often travel back to my home state for special family occasions, birthdays and Christmas for example. My wife is a 22-year military veteran, and when she discharged it was medically. She has been diagnosed with PTSD, anxiety and depression, and has spent several stints in psychiatric hospital, one for 4 months. She was prescribed an assistance, service, dog who we have trained up under the supervision of a registered organization, and she, we'll call her Daisy, is formally qualified and papered. She goes pretty much wherever we go, including interstate flying in the cabin of the plane, with my wife in an ambulance to hospital, and also was interned with her at psychiatric units. My family are all aware of this and mostly supportive. However, the last time we visited for my niece's 21st birthday, I was questioned by both my sister and my niece about whether Daisy was accompanying my wife to the party, which I responded that she was, as my wife really struggles in loud crowded environments. There was about 80 people and loud music together in one room. My niece suggested several reasons why Daisy shouldn't go: loud music, balloons, lots of people. Which I assured her Daisy was fine with, and they already know this, being very familiar with Daisy's very calm temperament. My sister then spoke to me after my niece and also said similar things, not outright saying, but heavily suggesting it would be better if Daisy didn't attend. I just said if my wife feels she needs her, she will be attending. Sometimes my wife has been able to do small things without her, but never big events like parties, even shopping centers and restaurants. Daisy comes with her. Anyway, the party came and went. My wife had to take 4 Valium to cope, but managed to sit through the evening with Daisy by her side at her feet at a table. Other people throughout the evening went over to talk to her, and most didn't even notice Daisy was there. For myself, I'm used to my wife's conditions and knew that although she was struggling, she was coping and even enjoying talking to people at times. I danced the night away, periodically sitting down beside my wife and checking in. After the party was over, we had a few days at my sister's house where the topic of her son's impending wedding came up. Again, I was asked by my sister if my wife would be taking Daisy. I again said yes, more than likely, for the same reasons as the 21. Lots of people, loud noises, crowded environment. Again, it was inferred that the event wouldn't be suitable for Daisy. The tables were really crowded, lots of people, plus my sister suggested that if my wife didn't have Daisy she would be able to get up and dance. Before my wife had her breakdown, she was not a dancer, and now with her anxiety, there's no way she'd be comfortable out on a dance floor. I was so taken aback I didn't know how to respond. My wife heard my sister talking to me, and so she suggested she only go to the ceremony and skip the reception to avoid my sister getting stressed out about her dog. My sister snapped they are at the same venue. Then softened it with, of course we want you to come. Both my wife and I felt very uncomfortable and kept reassuring my sister Daisy would be fine, as she has been taught to sit under my wife's chair out of the way. It felt like the concerns raised weren't genuine concerns but just a way to feel like Daisy was unwelcome. We flew back home not long after, and this is where I may be TA. We woke up the next morning and the first words out of my wife's mouth were maybe and should just stay home for the wedding and you go by yourself so I don't stress your sister out by taking Daisy. I felt so bad for her. It's taken such a long time for her to feel comfortable in going out in public, and Daisy has been instrumental in that, and now my family were making her feel like she wasn't welcome with her assistant's dog. I reassured her, but later in the day I rang my sister and told her what my wife had said, and that perhaps more care could be taken to make sure my wife wasn't left feeling that her conditions were not considered. I told her my wife had said perhaps she shouldn't go to avoid stressing her out, and my sister just said yes and? To which I replied that she had been prescribed a dog for a reason, and without her dog my wife would likely not go anywhere, like she used to. My wife said well she was better last time she was down, she didn't take her everywhere. I explained that mental health goes up and down. Last time she was doing a bit better, however she'd just been sick and was put on medication that messed with her regular meds and so was only just coming out of that. Also, I reminded my sister the last time we didn't really go out apart from to a restaurant, to which Daisy also came. I just feel like I'm constantly trying to prove my wife's medical conditions. Even her PTSD has been questioned, as, my sister's words, she didn't go to Afghanistan. She even had her best friend question me about it. I'm tempted to tell them some of my wife's horror stories, but I just keep it general so they don't get secondhand trauma. My sister also said that she had to think about other people, and I said why? Does someone have a problem with Daisy attending? And she said her son, my nephew, and his future wife had spoken to her about it. I said well I'll ring them then, which she hastily replied, no you can't, they spoke to me in confidence. I said I just don't understand what you're trying to achieve, and she said it's not just about you, I have to think of other people. I said well you wouldn't be asking Nana if she was bring her wheelie walker, and she said actually Nana might be in a wheelchair so I'll have to put her at the end of the table, to which I snapped and said yes, but you wouldn't tell her she's not allowed to bring her wheelchair. And she replied, I didn't say you couldn't bring Daisy. I said back that it was disingenuous to pretend that your questions aren't designed to make us feel like she shouldn't be coming. To which she replied that she couldn't handle this stress I was causing her, and she said goodbye and hung up. So Ada for calling my sister out on all her questions regarding my wife's assistance dog? Am I too sensitive, like my sister said? Commenter. I would be calling your nephew and finding out what the actual truth is. Then telling your sister what's what. Your wife and Daisy are one person, they come as a package. If she has a problem, she needs to verbalize properly what it is and stop beating around the bush. It sounds to me she's one of those people who think people with mental health conditions should just get over them. I hope she never has to suffer what your wife has been through. Absolutely NTA, and much love to your wife. Update 1. After reading the supportive comments from almost everyone, I ended up bringing my nephew. Firstly, a few clarifications. 1. I am a woman, it's a same-sex marriage, so I'm not her husband but her wife. 2. Her Valium is only 2 mg, she took 4 that night, which is 8 mg, which means she was nowhere near whacked out of mind like some suggested. She has 5 mg tablets as well, but prefers to titrate the dose herself in 2 mg increments for precisely that reason. 3. Yes, I was up dancing the night away, and this does not make me a monster. We rarely go out, and when we do, my wife loves seeing me enjoy myself and letting my hair down, as much of my life is in service to her and her conditions. She gets enjoyment from me having fun too. Plus the dance floor was like 3 meters from where she was sitting, and I could see her watching me and smiling. 4. Please refrain from calling my sister nasty names. Yes, she is out of line here, but she, and her kids, are my only immediate family and are very important to me. Going NC would hurt me as much as her. Anyway, for the update. I rang my nephew and asked him if he and his bride had a problem with Daisy accompanying my wife to their wedding, as my sister was suggesting they did. I said that while my sister hadn't directly said Daisy couldn't go, it was being heavily implied that she wasn't welcome. My nephew seemed kind of confused initially and didn't really answer the question other than to say he hadn't really thought about it. I wondered then if he was being cagey, so I asked him for his total honesty, and he said that when he spoke to his mum. Then he stopped and said, actually, Mum spoke to me. He also told her he hadn't thought about it. He then said he hadn't even asked his fiancée yet. I told him my anxiety was really high over this and I just needed to know how he felt, and he said, I guess I just assumed Daisy would be going with your wife, as they're kind of a package deal. I got quite emotional hearing this, and he told me not to worry, that everything must have been blown out of proportion, and so long as my wife was okay. He's always been a really caring kid, which is why I had my suspicions that my sister wasn't being totally honest. Anyway, we chatted some more. He told me to stop crying, otherwise he'd cry at work and all his mates would laugh at him, which made me laugh. He said he'd ring his mum, so I guess shit is going to hit the fan. I have several stress-related conditions because of what I've been through keeping my wife alive, so I really struggle these days with anxiety. I have Minoka and have had a heart attack in the past from stress, to cast Ubo. I've been having really bad chest pain from this and stomach upset, so although I was tempted to tell my nephew not to call his mom, I need a resolution one way or another. The limbo is too difficult to manage. Update 2. 2 months later, I've been asked for an update quite a few times now, and I'm sorry, but I just haven't been able to face it. So I'll try my best. Here goes. After I spoke to my nephew, my sister rang me, pretty livid that I'd spoken to him. She said she'd never said Daisy couldn't come. I guess technically that's true, but that she didn't understand why Daisy was sometimes with my wife and sometimes not, and it was all too confusing for her, and could I explain it, etc., etc. Firstly, my wife and Daisy are together over 90% of the time. I think one time when we were visiting my sister, we popped down the local shops briefly and Daisy didn't come. We were out for half an hour tops, and my wife was having a good day. My sister then brought up a motorbike event that my wife had mentioned she might be going to later in the year, and said that obviously my wife wouldn't take Daisy, so how did I explain that? I said I didn't know about that, and I wasn't even sure my wife was going. When I spoke to my wife later on, she said she hadn't decided yet if she was going, as it was months away and she wouldn't know how she would feel, and that if she went Daisy would be going, as they have support vehicles and she could travel on that while my wife was on the bike, and be with my wife the rest of the time. Obviously my wife would only attempt this trip if she was in a good place, as riding a motorcycle long distance takes a lot of concentration and energy. At this stage she thinks she's probably not going, but it's nice to dream. My sister said she never said anything about Afghanistan, promptly followed by, I know there's Iraq and Iran as well, also 2 places my wife hasn't been in the Navy either, so that didn't really help her case. Anyway, it was a whole lot of emotional justifying and defending her position, gaslighting, etc. It was exhausting and emotionally draining, and I was an anxious crying mess by the end of it. Trying to defend my wife's medically diagnosed conditions and her medically prescribed assistance dog. We're in Australia, assistance dogs equals service dogs. My sister said the whole point was she just wanted to be able to discuss it, and that I was just like Andy Dash, someone she hates, so that was another kick in the guts. I finished up by saying, I feel we have discussed it now, and there was no need for further discussion. Since then I've been very panicky, feeling like I won't have a family if we didn't get over this, like she turned her kids against me, misrepresent what I was saying, etc. So I kept calling, trying to have friendly normal chats, trying to get back to a happy place. I was totally out of control and desperate to smooth things over. I ended up on medication just to cope with my anxiety. Sorry if this is all a bit scattered. I'm finding it hard to write about as I don't want to think about it and spiral. I'm better now, more in control, but it's been a couple of months getting there. Since the argument we have been civil, but it's a weird vibe, like a big fat elephant sitting in the room. Today I was having a conversation with her, and things were a little warmer, until she started talking about our uncle, who admittedly is a bit of a strange guy, and who she also hates, saying how dare he decide my niece, her daughter, had a problem with him. He had sent her a text message that she didn't reply to, so he wrote to me saying he didn't mean to upset her, he was just making assumptions. Then she started ranting about how this family has a real problem with that, people making assumptions about other people's intentions, which I knew was having a go at me and my wife, so I cut her off and said I'd better let you go back to work and said goodbye. My sister is never going to admit fault, she's always the victim, everyone else is oversensitive or just plain wrong, and it's just so disappointing and maddening, but there's nothing to be done. It's either I stand up, and we fight and she never talks to me again, or I just try to focus on her good points, she does have them, and ignore this behavior. Surely deep down she must feel bad? Maybe? I can't imagine how she can possibly think her behavior is okay, but maybe she does. All I can do is have boundaries but try to assert them gently and without too much conflict. On a positive note, I spoke to my nephew again when I rang him for his birthday, and he brought it up again. I was going to leave it, and reassured me that he'd spoke to his fiancée and both of them are happy to have Daisy there and it's all been a misunderstanding and he didn't want his mom and I to fall out over this. He's such a good kid, well, man now. He also knows his mom very well, but like everyone takes the path of least resistance. He even defended her saying that he probably gave her the wrong impression. He didn't, he's just trying to take the responsibility off his mom, which is something he would do as he wants everyone to get along. I wish just for once she could see that sometimes her behavior is really hurtful. And ease up on the judgment and controlling behavior. She never takes responsibility for her harsh words. Anyone have any ideas what makes someone behave this way? Because I'm stumped. Thanks for listening, I can't talk to anyone else.